Masechet Baba Mesia Daf Nun Gimel. We're starting off with a tangent regarding Ma'aser Sheni, picking up on a statement that Chizkiah said on the previous daf. Kufa. Amar Chizkiah Ma'aser Sheni she'en bo shave peruta. Omer hu v'chumsho mechulal al ma'ot harishonot lefi she'i efshar lo le'adam lesamsem me'otav. If someone has Ma'aser Sheni produce and he wants to, it's hard for him to carry it all the way to Jerusalem, so he wants to redeem it with a coin. The problem is that he has very little, and it's not even worth one peruta. So how is he going to redeem it for money if it's not worth any currency? So the Chizkiah has an answer. He says, you take this less than shave peruta. Let's say we said yesterday, like one cucumber. So you always have to add a fifth when you redeem Maaser Sheni. Rambam says the reason is because owners tend to undervalue what they have because they don't want to use so much money. But even if you undervalue somewhat, it'll be within 20%. So if you add 20%, then you have a good cushion and that you're giving the proper amount. So you say the amount of this one cucumber and the 20% added, that all adds up to less than a peruta. So even though I can't redeem it with an actual coin because it's so little, but here's what Chizkiah says you can do. You can redeem it onto a coin that you used already, right? Beforehand, yesterday, I had a whole lot of produce and I redeemed it for a shekel coin, and a selah coin, any kind. And there's always a little extra room. Why? Because a person cannot possibly be so exacting that he has the exact number of 10 shekels worth of olives on a 10 shekel coin. It's never so exacting. So therefore, there's always a person always has a little bit less produce than the actual coin is worth. There's a little bit more room on the coin to redeem more produce, and certainly enough room for just a little bit less than a peruta. So we can say I want it to be added on to that less than I want the less than peruta produce to be added on and redeemed with the coin that I already designated for Maaser Sheni. Good, that's what Chizkiah said, and from there we learned that one can redeem less than shaveh peruta of produce. And now we're going to challenge this. Metibesh, Mishnah in Masechet Chala. Haturma v'bikurim chayvim alehem mita v'chomesh. A law that applies to both teruma, that when the farmer has to give to the kohen, and bikurim, also that the farmer brings his first fruit and gives it to the kohen, donates to the Bet HaMikdash. In both of those cases, if someone, a non-kohen, would partake of it and eat it, that person, if they did it on purpose, would be chayav mita. This is mita bidei shamayim. The court doesn't actually kill him. It's a heavenly death penalty. If he did it by mistake, he has to add 1/5. Furthermore, vasurim lezarim, both of these things are prohibited to non-kohanim, v'nichse kohen, and they are the property of the kohen, meaning if a kohen wanted to use this for kiddushin, he wants to take some teruma, and he gives it to a woman, you are mikudeshet to me with this. It has personal value. In order for kiddushin to work, you have to own the coin, or the produce, or whatever you're giving her. So, yes, he can do that. It's his personal property. And both of these, teruma and bikurim, if they get mixed up in other produce, as long as it's less than 1 in 100, it's batel. It's not like 1 in a majority. It's not like 1 in 60. This has to go all the way to 1 in 100. If it's 1 in 101, it's batel and the whole thing's permitted. If it's 1 in 99, then it's still the whole thing is prohibited. Before you eat them, kohen has to wash his hands. This is why we wash our hands before bread. We're acting like kohanim who would wash their hands before eating teruma and bikurim, ve'areb shemesh, and if someone was tameh that day, let's say they touched dead sheretz, and they went to the mikveh, and then they have to wait until nightfall in order to eat teruma and bikurim, so that they only become totally pure when nightfall comes. Before that, they are tivul yom, not 100% tahor. Summary statement: all these laws apply both to teruma and bikurim, but they do not apply to maaser. We're talking about maaser sheni. So now we ask, we didn't ask the question yet on Chizkiah. We're still building up to it. Right? Remember what Chizkiah said? Okay, ma she'en ken b'maaser. What does the Mishnah mean that this is not true? Which part of this is not true for maaser sheni? La mikla de maaser batel beruba. Maybe what's different is the 1 in 100 that applies to teruma and bikurim. However, maaser sheni that falls into other produce, that maybe that is batel berov, as long as it's a majority permitted food and only a minority is just 1 and 2 is not, then that would be permitted. But how could it be that maaser sheni would be negated at all? After all, according to Chizkiah, in any case, you can always permit it. How could you permit it? By redeeming it. In other words, even if some maaser sheni fell into a whole bunch of other regular fruit, right? Two parts maaser sheni fell into 3 parts of regular food, and so it would be batel. There is a rule, however, that if there's something davar sheyesh lo matirin, something that will be permitted, then it's not negated, it's not batel forever. Rambam says that's the reason why chametz on Pesach is not batel, not even 1 in 1,000, because if there's a mixture, you could just wait till after Pesach and then it's permitted. So therefore, it's not batel. So here also, if some maaser sheni falls into regular produce, you can always redeem it. You say, listen, whatever maaser sheni fell in there, I know I had 1 pound of maaser sheni olives that fell into this thing of 1.1 pounds of regular olives, so I'll redeem 1 pound of olives, I'll redeem to this coin, and then it's all permitted. And if you say, but what if it's less than shaveh peruta? Less than shaveh peruta, there's no monetary value that I can transfer to a coin because it has no monetary value if it's less than a peruta. And so maybe that's why it's not davar sheyesh lo matirin, and that's why it is batel. But according to Chizkiah, even something that's less than a peruta, I can redeem with a coin that I used already that has a little leftover room. And so this is the challenge against Chizkiah. If this Mishnah in fact applies that maaser sheni can be batel, then it must be that it's not davar sheyesh lo matirin. If it's not davar sheyesh lo matirin, there has to be some scenario where maaser sheni cannot be redeemed. And what would that scenario be? Would it not be when it's less than maaser sheni? So Chizkiah must be wrong, and you cannot redeem less than the peruta maaser sheni. Okay, that's the question. We try to answer it. Wait a second. How do you know that when the Mishnah says this, everything in here is not true, or some parts of this Mishnah are not true for maaser? How do you know that means that it's not true that's 1 in 100, it's batel in a simple majority? Maybe it means it's not batel at all, meaning unlike teruma and bikurim that are batel in 1 in 100, maaser sheni is not batel, not even 1 in 1,000. Maybe that's what it means, and then they would agree with Chizkiah. And we answer, lama sit amar tachi tilagabe teruma chumre de teruma katane kule de teruma la katane. No, it can't be that, because with regard to teruma, this Mishnah is listing the ways that teruma is more stringent than maaser sheni, not the ways that it's less stringent, right? And all these things, maaser sheni can be eaten by anybody, not only by a kohen, and you certainly wouldn't get a penalty, a death penalty, or have to add a fifth if a non-kohen eats it. Non-kohenim are allowed to eat it. So you see, other things on the list are all things that the teruma is more stringent on, not less stringent. So it doesn't make sense that the not so for maaser sheni would mean that maaser sheni is not batel and is more stringent than teruma. But we ask, katane vehen nichse kohen. Hold on, one of the items that you listed, character traits of teruma, is that it's his personal property. And that is actually a leniency, because the teruma is the kohen's personal property. He can use it for kiddushin, to do kiddushin for a woman, and that is a leniency that's not true for maaser sheni. Maaser sheni, even though the owner can go and bring it to Jerusalem and eat it and share it and do everything with it, still it's not actually his personal property, and that he cannot do kiddushin with it. He's just allowed to eat it. It's like Hashem says, it's mine, you're allowed to eat it. If you bring it to Jerusalem, you bring it over to my house, then then you can eat it, I'll let you eat it. But really, it does not belong to him. So you see that not everything on the list is a stringency of Maaseh Sheni. Some things are a stringency of Terumah. Some things are a leniency of Terumah. Maybe this also. And in fact, it means that Terumah, that Maaseh Sheni is not batel at all. We say, La sakadatech. No, don't think that. The Tanya Behedya, Maaseh Sheni, batel berubah. We have a baraita, explicit baraita, commenting on this Mishnah that says, Maaseh Sheni is batel in a majority. I don't know if it's commenting on this Mishnah, whatever. We have a baraita that says, Maaseh Sheni is batel berov. So it is in fact batel berov, not in one in 1,000. And so therefore, you see, if it's batel, it must be because it's davar sheyesh lo, davar she'en lo matirin. Right? There's no other. It's not, even if you wait, there's no way to make it mutad. That's therefore it's batel. Challenge to Chizkiyah. ובאיזה מעשה שני אמרו במעשה שאין בו שווה פירוטה ושנכנס לירושלים ויסע והמית לדחזקיה לעבד לדחזקיה ונאכל למעות על מעות הראשונות. So now we restate our question. What kind of מעשה שני are we talking about? Is it not that it's less than a shaveh peruta, and he brought it into Jerusalem, and he already left with it, and didn't use it, didn't spend it? We'll talk about this line in a couple of minutes. And if Chizkiah is correct, well then let him simply redeem that little bit of maaser sheni produce that got mixed up in the majority, and he can redeem it. And that's it. And he could redeem it with coins that he used before, and therefore it should not be batel forever because it's davar she yesh lo matirin. You can redeem it. And the answer is, de la parig. We're talking about a case where he did not redeem anything beforehand. He doesn't have a coin. Maybe one time, sometime before in his life, he redeemed things, but whatever coins he had before that, he already brought to Jerusalem and spent them. This past cycle, since he went to Jerusalem, he hasn't redeemed any other Maaseh Sheni produce. So he has no other coin to use, and that's the case that it's talking about. And that's why it's davar she en lo matirin. There's no way he can make it mutad, and therefore it is batel. Let's say that's the case. Wait, so that's not an answer. So let him bring some maaser sheni that he has, and he'll join it together. Right, so he can go get some and maaser sheni produce. Right, whatever he's a farmer, whatever he's producing, where did he get this stuff from? So let him get other maaser and join it together, and redeem it. Deoraita, Drabanan, Lamistarfe. No, he can't do that because you can't join together Deoraita, Maaseh Sheni produce that you have required on the Deoraita level with that on the Drabanan level. You see a mixture. When we say a mixture is prohibited, it's only prohibited midrabanan. And the Doraita level, when something is batel, berov, that's it. On the Doraita level, forget about it, just permitted. Only midrabanan, you say, listen, there's still stuff in there. Okay, midrabanan, you have to do something about that. It's prohibited unless you redeem it. Fine. So this Maaseh Sheni is prohibited midrabanan, the one that's less than the peruta that's mixed in. If you're telling me to go get some other Maaseh Sheni that's I'm liable for on the Deoraita level, well, I can't join them together and say I want to redeem this Deoraita Maaseh Sheni with the Rabbanan Maaseh Sheni. That doesn't work. Okay, venete demai. Okay, so let me bring some demai. Demai is something that's doubtful. I got it from Ama'aretz, and maybe they already took the Maaseh Sheni, maybe not. So on the Doraita level, so I'm okay. Only the Rabbanan say, listen, you have to be very careful, be stringent, and take Maaseh Sheni from it. But it's only required to take the Maaseh Sheni me the Rabbanan. So let me get some demai produce. I'll take Maaseh Sheni from that. That's a Rabbanan level, and I'll redeem it together with the other Dirabanan level Maaseh Sheni that is less than a Piruta that got mixed up. And therefore it's the same level. Can I do that together? And the answer is no. Dil Ma'atela Tuyeh Vadai. No, we can't do that Lechatechila because it's a Gezerah. If you permit people to do that, then they're going to say, oh, look, I can always combine a mixture with that which that's not a mixture. So even though in this case it's Demai, people will forget that and end up combining a mixture with something that is definitely Maaseh Sheni on the Deoraita level. And so therefore, if you can't do it on a with the Deoraita, also you can't do it with Demai, and so that's why you can't do that. בפרוטה ומכסה ונחלל היי על האיך יתרה. Okay, so why not bring 2 peruta coins and take 1.5 perutot worth of produce, that is maaser sheni, and redeem it on those 2 coins, and now you'll have 2 little coins that are maaser sheni coins, and then you can take the less than peruta that of maaser sheni that got mixed up in the mixture and do the chizkiyah method and redeem it on those coins that you already used. Or we said before, oh, I don't have any coins. I didn't redeem anything. Okay, so take a little bit of stuff and redeem it, and then you'll have a coin. And we answer, Mesia barat peruta mechasa tafsa l'shte perutot la peruta tafsa peruta v'chasi peruta la tafsa. Do you think that 1.5 perutot worth of produce can be redeemed onto 2 separate little peruta coins? It doesn't work that way. If you try to do that, then that produce will fill up 1 peruta, and then you'll have left over a half a peruta's worth of produce, and that will not go on the second peruta. That will now revert. We separate the whole peruta and the leftovers, and now that will revert to the same problem that we had before, that something that's less than a peruta is not worth any money, and therefore cannot be redeemed. And so now you'll have yet another half a peruta, less than half a peruta, that you have a problem redeeming. Hadarav yaled deoraita udrabanan udoraita udrabanan la mistarfe. And now what you have once again is deoraita and drabanan. If you want to combine them together, right, and take this half peruta that you have of produce, that's midoraita, and the other half that got mixed in, but that's only the drabanan, and you cannot join deoraita and drabanan together, so that won't work. Venete isad. Okay, I know. Bring an isad coin that's worth 8 perutot, and then take a little bit of produce, that 1.5, and redeem it onto this isad coin, and then the whole thing will be redeemed onto there, and they'll be left over. And then you can use the chizkiyah method and bring that leftover from the half peruta that was mixed in. And the answer is Dilma te'ad perutot, and we can't allow that gezerah. If we allow someone to use the nisad coin, then they'll say, oh, the nisad coin is the same as bringing just a few perutot, and then next time they may bring a few perutot and to redeem it on, and that won't work. So therefore, you cannot do that either. That's the conclusion. This is the answer. Since there is no way to redeem that this half peruta that got worth of maaser sheni that got mixed up in other produce. So because there's no way to do it, therefore it is batel. And so this is an answer to Chizkiyah. Chizkiyah says, yes, in fact, if you have a whole less than a peruta's worth of produce, and it's a liable deoraita, and then you have another coin, or even if it's mixed in, and you have another coin that you already used for produce before, then you can say, you know what, I'll add it on. That you can do. But that won't work in all cases, since there is some case where you cannot do that. It turns out to be davar she'en lo matirin, right? There are cases where there is no way to redeem that less than peruta that got mixed up in another group, and therefore, since there are such cases, in that case, when it falls in and gets mixed up, it is batel birov. And so that's how we can explain that case in the baraita that says less than the peruta that fell into others into more is batel birov. All right, that explains that case. Now the baraita mentioned another case. We're going to treat it right now like a separate case. Now this is not related to the less than peruta. The second case is v'shenichnas Yerushalayim b'yasa. If you have maaser sheni produce that you brought into Jerusalem, and then you took it back out of Jerusalem, and you didn't consume it when it was in Jerusalem, so then it's batel birov. Okay, ve'amai lihadar v'ne'ayileh. Why should it be batel birov? This is davar sheyesh lo matirin, because you can just bring it back into Jerusalem and eat it there. So why should it be batel? We have a rule: anything that can be permitted is not batel? The answer is b'shenit ma. It's maaser sheni that became tameh. Maaser sheni has to be in betahora, right? Anybody can eat it, but it has to be in Jerusalem, and they have to be tahor. Once it becomes tameh, that's why they can't eat it. V'nifrekeh, why not redeem it? De'amar Rabbi Elazar minayin l'maaser sheni shenitma shepodin oto. Rabbi Elazar says, how do you know that maaser sheni produce that became tameh, you can still redeem it onto money? Afilu b'Yerushalayim, even if you're in Jerusalem. We know that you can redeem money outside of Jerusalem because it's hard to carry. But how do you know you can even redeem it in Jerusalem if it's tameh? Shenemar ki lo tuchal se'eto ve'en se'et el achila shenemar v'yisa mas'ot me'et panav. From the pasuk that if you cannot, literally this means you cannot carry it because the maaser sheni produce is too much, it's too heavy, it's too long to carry, then you can redeem it. But the Rasha says se'et means eating, as we see from pasuk regarding Yosef and his brothers. Right, they took portions. Mas'ot is called food. Portions are called mas'ot. And so from this, the Rasha, we learned that also, even if it's in Jerusalem, but you cannot eat it because it's tameh, then you can redeem it. So since this is something that yesh lo matirin, you can redeem it, it should not be batel berov. So what's the case talking about? Ela belakoch bechesef maaser sheni. Rather, we're talking about that you lived far away, you had maaser sheni, you redeemed it onto money. You brought that money to Jerusalem and bought food with it. So now, this is already food that you bought to eat. Now you took it back out of Jerusalem, and so now you can't eat it outside of Jerusalem anymore. So that's why it's batel berov. We ask about that. Well, that also you can redeem it again. In other words, even though you had food, you redeemed it onto money, you went to Jerusalem, you bought food, but now you left Jerusalem, you can redeem that food also onto money. Titnan halakor bechesed maaser sheni shenitma yipadeh. As it says in the Mishnah, maaser sheni, if you buy with kesed maaser sheni money, food, and the food becomes tameh, so you can't eat it here in Jerusalem, nevertheless, you can redeem it, and so therefore, even if it fell into other food, it should not be batel because you can simply redeem it, and then you can use the money. You know what? We're following the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda says that once you buy food in Jerusalem with it, then you cannot redeem it again, and if it's tameh, then you have to bury it. There's nothing you can do with it. You can't eat it because it's tameh, and you cannot change it to money because he says you can only change into money the original produce that you had that you grew, but anything that you bought in Jerusalem you cannot redeem onto money. But now we ask a question: if it's Yehuda, then why does it have to be that he left Jerusalem? Even if he didn't leave, it will be the same thing. You had maaser sheni money. You came to Jerusalem. You bought food, and that became tameh, so nothing you could do with it, right? Even in Jerusalem, it's tameh, you can't eat it, and you're not allowed to redeem it, even in Jerusalem. So it should be that it should be buried even there. Why does Braita say if you brought it in and you took it out of Jerusalem? So it can't be that that's the answer. Rather, in fact, it's tahor. And what does it mean? That you exited? Not that you physically exited Jerusalem, but rather that the walls of Jerusalem had fallen in between. You brought money, maaser sheni money, into Jerusalem and bought produce there, and then the walls fell down, and in the meantime you left Jerusalem. So now what are you going to do? There's no way to bring it back into Jerusalem because the walls are not there anymore, and that's why it's not a davar sheyesh lo matirin. You can't, nothing you could do to do about it, and therefore it's batel berov because it's not davar sheyesh lo matirin. With challenge to that, v'amarava mechisa le'echol deoraita, mechisot liklot derabanan, v'chi gazru derabanan ki itnehu lemechisot, ki letnu lemechisot lo gazru rabanan. Rava taught that the law that you have to eat maaser sheni produce in Jerusalem, that's a deoraita law, so there's no question about that. But the law that you cannot redeem Maaser Sheni produce that left Jerusalem. That is only a prohibition midrabanan. And so when the rabbis made that gezerah, doesn't it make sense that they only made that gezerah when there are walls of Jerusalem, when they're intact? But if the walls fell down, then the rabbis will not have made that gezerah, right? And because there are no walls, so what's the difference? So therefore, you should be allowed to redeem it back into money. So you had this produce, you brought it to Jerusalem when the walls were up, but then the walls fell down, and that produce got mixed up into a mixture, and now how are you going to get it out? Is it batel? So why don't we say no, it's not batel, because you can redeem it, and the gezerah that you cannot redeem produce that left the walls should not apply if there are no walls. And we answer la pelug rabbanan ben mechisot ben mechisot. No, the rabbis did not make a difference between whether there are or not walls. Once they made the gezerah, they made it totally, and therefore this is the case. Good, we have a case, right? We're talking about a case where you brought money of Maaser Sheni into Jerusalem, and you bought produce, and it got mixed up, and now we don't know. We don't know. It's batel. Is it batel bedov? Well, we say, well, why don't you redeem it? Well, we could redeem it, but the problem is the walls fell down, and once the walls fell down, then that's the same as it being out of the walls, and you're not allowed to redeem Maaser Sheni produce that's out of the walls. And even though there are no walls, the rabbis made a gezerah and did not make a difference, and therefore one cannot redeem it. Since you cannot redeem it, this not is davar she en lo matirin, and it is batel bedov. We next have yet a different interpretation of that braita, treating it not as two separate cases, but as all one case. Rav Huna bar Yehuda amar Rav Sheshet, Chada katane, Maaser Sheni she'en bo shaveh pruta shenichdas liYerushalayim veyasa. The braita is talking about one case of Maaser Sheni that you brought into Jerusalem. It's only a little bit. It's just like one cucumber. It's not worth a peruta. And you brought it in, and you brought it back out of Jerusalem, and it got mixed up into a mixture. It's batel bedov. So we ask, Amai, why should it be batel bedov and permitted? Why don't you bring it back into Jerusalem, and then you can bring the mixture, bring the whole mixture in and eat that whole mixture, because the Maaser Sheni part of it you're allowed to eat in Jerusalem, and therefore it's davar she yesh lo matirin and should not be batel bedov. And the answer, din full mechisot, because you brought it in, and then now the mechisot fell down. Once the walls of Jerusalem fall down, then it's like it's out of Jerusalem. You're not allowed to eat it, not even in Jerusalem, because there are no walls, and so that's the same as being outside of Jerusalem, so you can't eat it. But nevertheless, the prohibition of not redeeming, you can't redeem something that you brought into Jerusalem and then took back out, you're not allowed to redeem anymore. So now we're stuck. We cannot redeem it, we cannot eat it, like we said before. And therefore, it's davar she en lo matirin, and that's why it's batel bedov. We ask, v'nifreke, so why not redeem it? Hamarava mechisad lechol deoraita, mechisad liklot rabanan. V'chi gazur rabanan ki yitnu lemechisot, ki letnu lemechisot lo gazur rabanan. We ask, as we did before, you still should be able to redeem it, because Rava said the law that you're not allowed to eat in that you have to eat in Jerusalem, that's a deoraita law and has to have mechitzot. But the law that once it comes into Jerusalem, then the mechitzot make it that's in Jerusalem, and then once you take it out, you cannot redeem it anymore. That law is only the Rabbanan. And that, we say, where would the rabbis make a gezerah? If there are walls, it makes sense to make a gezerah. They say, and says, listen, if once you take it out, you're not allowed. But if there's no walls altogether, then you should be allowed to redeem it. Since there's no walls at all. Then the answer is la pelug rabbanan. The rabbis did not make a distinction between cases, and they said just like you're not allowed to redeem it when there are walls and you took it out, so too you're not allowed to redeem it even when there are no walls. Yachi ma'irya en bo shaveh peruta. Wait a second. If that's the case, then what does it matter if there's no less than a peruta's worth? Even if there is a peruta, this whole law would be the same thing, right? As this is basically as we said before. that this is more than a peruta, but you brought it in, and then the walls fell down, so you can't eat it there, you can't redeem it anymore. So the answer is Lami Bayaka Amad. You're right. It would be true whether there is more than a peruta or less, but the Baraita is giving you an even greater case. Not only if it's worth a peruta, then you say, once it came into the walls of Jerusalem, it's considered gathered in. And once something is gathered into Jerusalem, it cannot be redeemed anymore. That's for sure true. But I might have thought that if it's less than a peruta, maybe there's no law of gathering in. Since it's worth so little, you can't even say that the walls gathered it in to trigger the prohibition that you can't redeem it anymore. Since it's such a little bit, maybe I might have thought that law would not apply, and I can redeem it. Kamash Malan, that's why teach us that even if it's less than a peruta, still that's considered, once you bring it into Jerusalem, it's considered gathered into Jerusalem, and now you have to eat it in Jerusalem, and you can no longer redeem it. Teno Rabbanan, next baraita. Im gaol yigal ish mi ma'asro velo kol ma'asro petat ma'aser sheni shen bo shaveh peruta. This is the very the law that why you can't do redemption of a ma'aser sheni that's less than a peruta in the first place, because it says if you decide to redeem your ma'aser sheni, you have to add a fifth. And it says mi ma'asro, from one's ma'aser sheni, and not all of it. You can't redeem all of it. You have to leave some left over. So what does that mean? That you cannot, if it's worth less than a peruta, there's no amount that you could leave over, that you could take some of it. It's too little to divide. And that's why you cannot redeem less than a shaveh peruta. It's just not worth anything that you can even hold on to. It's not worth any money that you can say, okay, this is and this isn't. Itema Rav Ameh Amar en bo, Rav Aseh Amar en bechumsho. Rabbi Yochanan Amar en bo, Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish Amar en bechumsho. There's a machloket about when does this law apply. Rav Ameh says it applies if there's even if there's no even if the produce itself is not worth a peruta, then you can't do it. Rav Aseh, however, says it applies even if the fifth, right? Even if the thing itself, the produce itself is worth a peruta, but a fifth of the produce is not worth a peruta, then also you cannot redeem it. And there's a machloket, this parallel also. This is in Eretz Yisrael, also this is in Bavel, Rav Ameh and Rav Aseh, and also in Eretz Yisrael, the same machloket. Rabbi Yochanan says that you cannot redeem it if it itself, the produce itself, is worth less than a peruta. But according to Rabbi Yochanan and Rav Ameh, if the produce is worth more than a peruta, let's say it's only worth a peruta and a half, then you can redeem it, even though the fifth that you're adding onto it is worth less than a peruta. That's okay, you can redeem it because it's worth something. Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish says, no. If even if it's worth, the item itself is worth more than a peruta, but the fifth is worth less than a peruta, even then there's no way to redeem it. Okay, we're going to have a challenge now from a baraita that teaches metibe. Maaseh sheni she'en bo shaveh peruta, dayo sheyomar hu v'chumsho mechulal al ma'ot rishonot. If we have maaseh sheni that's worth less than a peruta, it's sufficient. We're going to learn from this word. It's dayod. It's sufficient that you say this produce and the fifth that has to be added onto it will be desacralized onto coins that I already used, like Chizkiah said. Now, Bishlam alamanda amad en bechumsho hanu tekatani dayo da'af al gav de bidide itbe kevad de bechumshe leka shapir. So we can understand this braita according to the opinions over here that said that there is not value in the fifth. The fifth is less than a peruta, but the item itself, the produce itself, has a peruta. That's why it says dayo. It's sufficient that even though the produce itself I could redeem because it has a peruta, but for the fifth that has no peruta, oh, that's okay. So then you can use this method. You generally can't use this method if you have a lot of produce because you're using a coin that you already used. It's already mostly full. You can only use this method if there's just a little bit and less than the peruta, so you can add it on to what was there before. So this word dayo will say, you know what, even though the produce itself is worth more than the peruta, because the fifth of it is so little, you know what, it's okay, you can use this method. So the word dayo is understandable. Elaman damar en bo my dayo kashya. But according to the opinion that says there's not even in the original produce, the produce itself is less than a peruta, then what's the word dayo? Just say that you will say that this entire amount is produce less than a peruta. I'm going to add it on to the coin that's already there. The word dayo is extraneous according to that opinion. Kashya, and therefore this is a conclusive challenge against that opinion. Baruch Adonai Leolam. Amen ve'amen.